Well, this is kind of a bummer. Part of the reason I wanted to come and hike this trail was so that I could take the trail that goes over South Fork Pass, because I've never been over on the other side of that pass. I wanted to camp at Deadman Lake, or maybe a little bit closer up to the pass, but there is a fire closure in effect, and it went into effect noon the day that I drove out here. So I didn't even have any idea that this was going to happen. But oh well, I can adjust my plans. I can't do the trail or the part of the trail that I wanted to do, but the majority of the hiking that I was going to do is on this other trail anyway, the Lost Man Loop trail. So I'll just hike more on that, and I guess exploring this other side of South Fork Pass will just have to wait to a different time. But it's the way things go in the mountains sometimes. I'm hiking along the Lost Man Loop trail here in Colorado. It's really close to Independence Pass. And this area is near and dear to my heart because it was actually 30 years ago, I think in August, back in 1989, that I went on my first ever backpacking trip. And it was during one of our family vacations. My aunt, who had done a number of backpacking trips, she planned out this little overnight backpacking trip for us. So we drove out from Kansas. We met my aunt here at the campground, which is across the road from the trailhead. She drove up here from Texas. And my family and my aunt, we went on an overnight backpacking trip along this trail. And we basically camped at South Fork Pass, just a little bit below the pass. And I had a really miserable hike in that day, at least part of it, because I got altitude sickness. And my memories of that night in camp aren't good, because I was just sicker than a dog with altitude sickness. I felt horrible. I remember that night I had a sleeping bag and everything, and I think I was actually supposed to sleep in the tent with my aunt, and I had my sleeping bag in there and everything, but I wound up just passing out and sleeping in I think the tent with my mom and my sister. I just kind of laid out on the floor, no sleeping bag, and fell asleep. I think it was kind of damp in there because it had rained that evening. And I remember sleeping in a puddle. I don't know if I literally slept in a puddle or not, but it wasn't, needless to say, it wasn't a comfortable night. But the next day I felt a lot better. Got over the altitude sickness thing. But this, that backpacking trip, along this trail was really the first time that I got to experience the alpine natural world more in depth. I had been up, driven through Rocky Mountain National Park and at Pikes Peak with a family, that sort of thing. But you don't really experience any of that near as much as you do when you're out here hiking through it for, a day and a half or whatever. But that's part of the reason why I wanted to come and hike this trail. I'm a bit out of breath because it's starting to get kind of high up here. And the trail here was kind of steep. But My original plan was to, I've done this whole loop trail a couple times. I've hiked over on the kind of far end of the loop several times. Climbed at least one of the mountain, or I've climbed a few of the mountains in this area in the past. About 14 years ago, my sister and I, we hiked up this part of the trail and climbed Williams Mountain, which is just kind of connected to South Fork Pass. But I'd never been over South Fork Pass. I know there's a little lake on the other side of it called Deadman Lake, and I really wanted to just go over there and explore because I'd never been there before. But unfortunately, with the fire closure, I'm not able to do that. You know, it's just one of those things that's totally beyond my control. There's no way I could have known that before I even came out, that it was going to be closed, because that closure was issued noon on the day I was driving out here. You know, I was like already in Colorado by that point in time. But anyway, yeah, this trail it's really what got me interested in getting up high into the mountains and backpacking. It really was a really neat experience. So, in part to kind of honor the 30-year anniversary of that little trip we took, I'm here again. It's definitely a place I like coming to. I feel kind of at home here in some ways. Well, here we are, the boundary of the Hunter-Fryingpan Wilderness. A few days ago, the weather report said that there was a small chance of some rain. Had a little bit of, teeny bit of rain this morning. Not really much, but National Weather Service forecast said there wasn't really any chance. So I'm hoping that this stuff just kind of burns off, and I don't mind the clouds, but I really don't want to get rained on. I just don't really like hiking in the rain if I don't have to. I can do it if I need to, but generally speaking, I don't mind rain in a lot of circumstances, but sometimes it's just something that you can kind of do without. Because when you're hiking in rain, you have your rain jacket on, and then you steam up and get wet underneath it. But if you don't wear it, you get soaked from the outside. So I'm just going to cross my fingers. the closed South Fork Pass Trail. Lost Man Trail. Lost Man Loop keeps going this way. I don't know exactly how it happened, but my foot kind of got torn up. It just has like this abrasion thing going on that I knew it was sore yesterday, and last night when I looked at it, I kind of just thought it was a sore spot, but it was a flat out abrasion. And I don't really think it happened yesterday when I was hiking out from Conundrum Hot Springs. Kind of wonder if it wasn't for my chacos or something. You know, that or I scraped it on a rock or something and I didn't realize it. But this morning I cut out a little piece of this mole foam and stuck it on there to help protect it, and it stayed on, and I'm sure it probably feels better having hiked with this on than if I hadn't put it on there. I've been in camp now for several hours, just kind of hanging out and taking it easy, eating lunch, just not really being in too much of a hurry to do anything. But I figured I ought to give you a little tour of my campsite, home for the night for me. Well, over here is my shelter, such as it is for the night. It's just my tarp that I usually use for my hammock. And excuse the mess. I have my sleeping pad and everything laid out there. The reason I have all the junk, my pack laying on it and all that, is I'm trying to keep things from blowing away because it's very windy up here. I mean, they were saying like 20, 30 miles per hour at times. It's supposed to drop down a little bit tonight, but it's still going to be pretty windy all night. But I just have a sheet of Tyvek between me and the ground. I have my fancy Thermarest NeoAir X Therm. And I was laying on this a little earlier, taking kind of a bit of a nap. And I did realize that the Tyvek is really slick. And the Thermarest just kind of wants to slide around on it. But I have my under my Airy 20 under quilt along with my little top quilt as well. I'm going to wrap up in that tonight. I think between the two of those I should be plenty warm. It's supposed to be dry tonight, so I'm not really worried about getting rained on. If I was, I would have set up the shelter a bit differently. It's pretty much a very lightweight shelter. It's just a lightweight poly silicone impregnated poly tarp. Just brought a little extra cordage. I'm using my trekking poles as poles, and so I got that set up. I guess you could say that this is my kitchen area over here. It's on the other side of the trees, So it has some decent shelter from the wind. The where my shelter's at, it also has some protection, although it's probably not as good as this spot, but it's a little flatter over there and more open. I found a good little spot to put my stove down here that protects it from the wind. That way I don't have to waste as much gas to boil water. But yeah, this is my my campsite for the night. It's definitely a little chilly. It's hasn't really been terribly warm today anyway. In the middle of the afternoon it wasn't so bad, but now it's later afternoon and I can tell the temperature's dropping down, you know, with the wind on top of that. That's why I'm wearing what I'm wearing. I have most of my layers on. But should be an interesting night. Might be a little chilly, but I'm confident I can stay warm enough. Well, pardon the crappiness in this video production. I have my lovely earphone microphone thing going on, and I'm just shooting this on my smartphone on a teeny little tripod that I've kind of got just right on a tree. So anyway, yeah, I tried to go really lightweight with this stuff, and so far I think it's actually been working out pretty well. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, 30 years ago when my family and my aunt came out here, we camped somewhere in this general area. I'm just kind of below South Fork Pass. And I don't think that we camped where I'm at here. I think we camped a little bit further over. But I think where I'm camping now is a better camping spot. It's definitely more protected than where we camped way back when. And I kind of went looking around to see if I could figure out where that spot was, but it was kind of hard. And you know, you're dealing with memories from when I was a 10-year-old. But one thing I do somehow remember was that night for our supper, we had, I'm sorry, this thing is, the autofocusing is, there we go. Maybe that'll help with the autofocus. Or not. For our dinner on that trip, somehow I remember that we had something called mountain chili. It was a freeze-dried meal. And I noticed that the Alpine Air backpacking food company, they have something called mountain chili, and it's the only brand I've seen that has anything called that in and of itself. So I got some of that, and I was going to have that for dinner tonight. I think I'm going to spruce it up a little bit, and it's a vegetarian chili, but I brought some tortillas and I have some cheese sticks, and for lunch I had Fritos and Frito bean dip. So I have some refried bean stuff I could put with it. I guess you don't need to add more beans to chili, but anyway. So I'm planning on having a good dinner. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Just been enjoying being out here in nature, being up in the alpine world that I love so much. It's neat to come back to the place where I really discovered it for the first time in depth. Really got to see it and feel it and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely felt it that first night. I felt the altitude, that's for sure. Not that that was a pleasant thing, but yeah, it has been kind of a special thing to be able to come back, even if my plans didn't really work out the way I wanted them to. It's almost more interesting that I'm spending the night up here than if I had spent it down at Deadman Lake like I was planning on it, because here I'm getting to stay the night where we camped that one night. That was really my first overnight I ever spent out in the wilderness. It was here, so it's kind of neat to be able to return to that. It's kind of interesting to see how things go with our lives, because, out of my family members, I know my sister and I, we came back, this was like, would have been 2003, and we hiked the trail as a day hike. So she's been back by this area that time. And then a few years after that, we came back and we climbed Williams Mountain, and we came by this area also. So she's been back to this general area a couple times since. But, the rest of my family members, I don't think any of them have been out here. Quite possibly, most of them wouldn't care to go backpacking again. I don't know, but yeah. It's kind of weird thinking about how I came out here and experienced this trail, this area as a 10-year-old, and now I'm back here as a 40-year-old experiencing it again. And I don't know, in a lot of ways it's a lot of it's the same. I think, you might have a deeper understanding about some stuff when you're 40 than you were when you're 10, but a lot of the just kind of wonder of nature and all that stuff, that's the same really for everybody. Anybody that loves nature loves the wilderness. But yeah, it's been good to be back. It's been good to be back. And whether your plans go the way you wanted them to or not, just getting out in the wilderness, I mean, how could that ever be a bad thing? How could you have a bad day like that? Here's my poor feet I was talking about earlier. I had some flat out abrasion here this morning, I noticed. I knew it was sore. I thought it was just a hot spot. Turns out it was worse than that. So I threw some of that mole foam on it, and it definitely helped. Gave it some padding, and it hasn't been too bad. But my feet are just more beat up than I would even have thought. I don't even know how half of this stuff happened. I don't know, maybe it was too much running around with wet feet and a pair of Crocs at Conundrum Hot Springs with bits of dirt and gravel or something in them, and I don't know. But my poor feet have taken a beating the last few days. Hopefully that shows up. But yeah, my poor feet are beat. Well, it's the next morning, obviously. I stayed plenty warm last night as I was sleeping. The Dextherm pad and my combination of my little lightweight over quilt inside that Airy 20 in a sleeping bag configuration, I guess you'd say, proved to work really well. The wind died down finally sometime late last night, which was nice. And so anyway, yeah, it was a good night. It's been up here. It's under that tarp. Not any precipitation. Didn't think I would. But I have some Mountain House biscuits and gravy rehydrating, so it should be ready to eat here anytime. Just gonna have some coffee, some breakfast, and finish packing up my stuff. I already have some of it packed up, and I'll be hiking out of here. But it's been nice being up here again and camping up here. I haven't actually spent a night in this. I was thinking about yesterday, this wilderness area, the Hunter-Fryingpan Wilderness here in Colorado. I haven't actually spent a night out here since 30 years ago, so it's been kind of neat to do that again. Even if it wasn't where I thought I was going to camp, that's all right. Shoot, it's, quite possibly even more special that I was able to actually do it right here, or had reason to do it right here and not somewhere else, a little bit further on down. But yeah, time for a good hot breakfast, and we'll go from there. Pretty sure that this is the place where we stopped and ate lunch 30 years ago as we were hiking in down on those rocks down there. Just about back down to the Lost Man Reservoir, which is pretty well the end of the hike. Thanks for coming along with me on this little journey, on this little revisit to a little backpacking trip 30 years ago that meant a lot to me. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. Share it with somebody if you think they might be interested, all that fun stuff. And until next time, this is Gareth with Mountain Coffee Outdoors. I'll see you then.